Authenticity. What a mindfuck of a concept. It's something that I've spent a long time trying to discover within myself. And what I've found is that there are a lot of things that get in the way of that discovery. But exploration can reveal some wonderful things to discover and then have a place from which you can grow that sense of authenticity and who we are. And then there's the layer of getting to know others and finding out who they are authentically. And how wonderful is that when you're able to meet someone, have conversations with them, and find those places where it's safe for you to kind of scratch beneath the surface of those masks, those walls that we put up to hide who we are, because exposing who we are exposes us to a deep level of judgment and ridicule and all those things. But when we create a safe place with others where they feel safe to expose who they are, and then when they do, it's met with love and compassion, like that's where some really deep connection can be made. And I think that's sort of the theme of this conversation with my good friend, April Whitney. We got into some very lovely topics of conversation, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the best part is that we met under some like really unexpected circumstances that just show me how wonderful it can be when you put yourself out there and you just give it a shot and say, hey, like, you want to hang out? Like, and I hope it encourages other folks to do the same, because there's some wonderful people out there, and talking to them can be just so wonderful. I don't know how else to say it. But this is what lies between a qualitative inquiry into whatever the fuck it is we're doing here. I hope you enjoy. But I play Rocket League. I've been playing that for since 2016.
Wow.
And I play it with my friend Nick, who lives in New York. He's a good friend from high school and stuff. And that's been our way to keep in touch for the past forever. Yeah.
I like that.
It's very cute, I would say. Yeah.
No, it wasn't during COVID. It was after I got a Meta, the Quest headset.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my sister would just meet in the metaverse or whatever and play mini golf and stuff. And it was honestly so fun. Because it's if you're playing a game together, it's a different type of time spent, right? Because you're not you don't have to be talking about meaningful things or catching up on life or talking about work. You can just be playing a game together.
Yeah.
And it's such a nice way to just if you can't be together in the same room, it's such a nice way to just log some memories with someone who's far away.
Yeah, I love that too. Logs of memories. Yeah. And that's also cool because it's I feel like whenever there's that distance, the only way to hang out and talk with someone, it's like you're always catching up. That's always seems to be the topic of the conversation.
Right.
But to be able to have some experience or log some memories with someone that's outside of the typical is pretty cool.
Yeah. Did you see the interview with it was Lex Friedman's podcast with
Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah.
I was literally going to ask you that.
Really?
That was the thing. Where they're in the hyper realistic version of the metaverse, and that shit was nuts.
It was insane.
Yeah.
This whole time I feel like everyone's been making fun of him for everything he's doing with the metaverse, and that was really impressive. Genuinely.
Yeah.
The accuracy or what Lex said about how it even mapped his facial imperfections, and that's what makes him identifiably him and not robotic or just creepy. Was such an interesting to build in all the imperfections of someone. I think it's such a cool and probably a huge challenge.
Oh yeah.
But just mapping the face, and I think that type of technology would totally transform what it feels like to be with someone in a room online. It would feel, it looked it felt like they were just together in a room. Super realistic.
And closing the distance between folks that are in reality very far apart and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's weird.
My only concern with that was there was one part where Mark Zuckerberg was talking about how you can change your very hyper realistic version of yourself to do this, that, and the other. And I think that's one of those concerns of mine where I'm I'm all about the fun of that. I imagine there's a fun side and a positive side of that, but the other side of that is people getting further and further away from who they are, you know what I mean? Or trying to like not, or like not accepting who they are, like in the physical realm. And if you like get kind of wrapped into that world that like feels so real, and I imagine the more that the technology evolves,
Yeah.
it might, you know, this is just obviously a speculation, but like it could, I just see the potential for it, like divorcing people from reality a little bit more, rather than having that like interconnected, like real feeling. I don't know, but maybe that's a paranoid thought.
I don't know. I think it begs the question, like, is who you are what you look like?
Well, I would say that's actually a great question, and part of where I want to start our conversation. But like I would say that the who you are isn't like, or what you look like isn't who you are, but accepting what you look like is an important step in that process of discovery.
Interesting.
Yeah, what do you think?
This is gonna really reveal a lot about me, but
Oh, perfect. Hell yeah.
this is something very few people know about me. It's so nerdy. When I was in high school, my sister, she's 5 years older than me. She went to RISD and she took some type of like computer design class, and it required that she create an account in Second Life and create this custom avatar and this whole world. And it was summertime, and she invited me to download. She was like, let's hang out in this little Second Life. Wait, do you know that?
I'm not familiar with anything you're
right.
talking about. No.
Imagine The Sims, but it's real people. Like it's a real world. And it's similar to the metaverse, except actually they have VR Second Life now. They have you can put on a headset and enter, but it's like anything. People live their lives in Second Life. Like they run businesses. It's wild, but I think it's very niche, very esoteric type of game. Anyways, I created an account, and I feel like we explored that a lot together, because you could completely customize your avatar. You could make it to be just like you, or so weird and different. And I feel like I got to know my sister so much better, because I saw her create her avatar over time, like build it really customizable way, because it's done by artists and computer like graphic designers and stuff, so you can get really detailed, totally custom. And I just learned so much about how she sees herself, and it's very different.
So interesting.
Yeah. And I feel like I also saw sides of her that you just could not be expressed without that type of tool.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just brought me way closer to her. And also even like the things that we got up to in there, like, were really silly, and I saw sides of her humor I hadn't seen before. I don't know, it just brought out such interesting parts of the psyche, and it made me question that a lot too. Like, how important how closely, like, is your identity really have anything to do with what you look like, or is it more of the contents of whatever your personality? Because we use it visually to recognize people, but imagine nobody had any physical appearances, then how would you actually, like, what would you hang your hat on to identify people? It'd have to be obviously like they're whatever makes them from like a personality standpoint.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because like, well, first I would say that like all of those are elements, because like we can't not like we can't get rid of the fact that we are visual creatures, that like, you know, we're object oriented, and like we do perceive based on those visual stimulus, right? Like, but like everything that you're saying there, I think I was thinking of like the customizable aspect of it, almost in a vacuum of like of isolation of someone doing that. But like I didn't consider the angle of like how much it could enhance someone's getting to know someone. And like, because I mean, we all have a idealized self, you know. And while I think just from my own personal journey standpoint, like think that the acceptance of who we are, like in every aspect of who we are, is an important step on it, but also is like an important part of identifying all of that is to bring those other things to the surface of like, what is my idealized self? What does that mean in the context of like how I treat myself, or like what I do in this world? Because I think it has a lot, it can say a lot. And it sounds like for you and your sister, it like was a very revealing process.
Yeah, it was revealing. And it was interesting also to see on a day-to-day basis, you could choose to be someone different every day or look different.
Yeah.
So some people will just cling on to like one avatar and that's what they always look like. And then other friends we made in the world I forget what it's called. I think it's called teleporting. You teleport to a sim, they would call it, like a land. It's so nerdy. And
I love it.
you have friends in there, right? And you can see their name tag, but they could look totally different one day, but you recognize them because also there's like voice. So you can hear them and you see their name. And they're totally dressed up as like something completely different every time you see them, which was just it was just an interesting aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then when I was in college, I studied science and technology studies. And one of the things that, I can't remember what class it was, but one of the things we were discussing was Initiative 2045, which is like this Russian initiative to basically eventually transfer human consciousness into like another body. I mean, nowadays people talk about this all the time, but I don't know, 10 years ago, I feel like people are like, that's so the singularity, like that's all so far away.
Science fiction sort of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But that could be, I mean, I don't know. I think more and more physical identity might fade away because if 40 years from now, we can literally just upload into another platform or another body or entity, then you are kind of choosing your vessel, which is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talking about the changing, some folks change their avatar a lot. Like it brought up a thought around like, how much, like, I mean, just going back to our perceptions, our visual perceptions of like how much those can inform an incorrect way or an accurate way of like who someone is.
Yeah.
Without like having talked to them. And maybe in that sort of space, there is more room to get to know the voice, like the inner workings of someone who like more their thought content rather than like having to bypass all of those assumptions our brains love to make. Because it's like, even as aware of a person as you can be, like it's hard to not like have some sort of bias in your mind, even if you are aware of it and are doing your best to look past it, it's still there. But maybe if it's like literally not there at all and all you are is getting this like very like non-representative of what someone looks like in the real world, but it does still give you like facial expression and stuff, because that's the important stuff. Like when it comes to the visual, like that's actually something that can convey information, like accurate information or helpful information is probably a better way of putting that.
Yeah.
Real quick, to make sure the mic is like pointing at your face or at your mouth. It's probably fine, but I just like
is that better?
Yeah, I think that's maybe that was more my perception. It looked
you're right.
But anyway, that leads actually kind of perfectly into the question I wanted to kind of just start this off and see what happens is what is like personal authenticity to you? Like what does that mean to you?
I knew you were going to have a very general opener based on your other ones. I was just going to comment on something related to this. So I'll loop back to that. I was going to say something that was cool about that platform was it brought out, I feel like it was an easy way to bring out the inner child of full grown adults, because the platform almost imposes play. Like you almost have to tap into some type of play to like, or creativity. And I think one of the saddest things about just being an adult is walking around and everyone's kind of just masking, but like deep down we all have an inner child that we've pretty much found ways to suppress or just mask so that we can make money and like do whatever we need to do to be adults. Survive. Yeah. But I think opportunities to get to know someone's inner child is cool and rare, and that it was deeply authentic, just getting to know someone's like actual like kid version of themselves.
That's okay. Fuck my question. We're just going to ride this.
Sorry to derail us.
No. Cause it's all really related, I think.
Yeah.
Cause that's something I think about a lot. It's just speaking on the inner child part, like we have a lot to learn from children, and the way that they act and stuff, like, because sometimes I think it's easy and understandable to like see some kid like freaking wailing in a supermarket or out in public somewhere and being like, oh, that's annoying, like, or whatever. But in reality, that kid is just an uninhibited like ball of expression, and they don't give a fuck. Like, it's like, and that's beautiful. That's so beautiful, because at some point we lose that. And I think that's kind of it sounds like what you're speaking to there, like that authentic sense of self. It's so funny. I'm working on my personal statement. I'm writing a little bit about like that. Like, there's a part of what I write is like, as a child, I couldn't have described my authentic self. I just was. But now, like, as an adult, like, there's layers of shit that like pile on top of it, and then we have to like rediscover that and everything. Is that, I mean, can you speak to your like journey of that sort of all that shit? Like,
this is pretty relevant. I just came from therapy. So
hey,
we were talking about some of this stuff.
What a great like precursor to a conversation that we're gonna get into some deep and personal shit, hopefully.
My journey with this it's an interesting parallel because I was a fencer for 18 years and pursued it professionally. I wore a physical mask in that sport that shielded my emotion from the audience and from my opponent. And it's a really interesting thing when you think about what it taught me as a kid. There are other things that happened in my life, but that contribute to this, but that even maybe preceded fencing or was the reason why I chose fencing as a sport. But I think it allowed me to, it basically created a layer of protection where I could feel safe in my fencing equipment, basically, without feeling seen. And that's been one of the things recently I've been thinking about in terms of just unraveling, like, what does it feel like to access your most authentic self? I think it's like, for me at least, allowing people to see me fully. And there's so much practice I've logged, not hiding, but just because I'm behind a mask, you cannot see any of my expression while I'm like exerting myself or performing or whatever.
Like, you're physically hidden. Like,
physically completely covered. That's been just like an interesting thing to peel back some layers on.
Yeah, and that makes so much. That evokes a number of thoughts. But like, you're in this thing that like. Well, how old were you when you started fencing?
8 or 9.
So from this young, like, critical point of development where you're like, I imagine fencing was something that garnered a lot of praise because you were really good at it. It was like a reward of sorts. And then on top of that, like, I mean, I was an athlete growing up, so that was like, whenever things were going well, it's like, oh yeah, like, that feels great and everything. But one little thing goes wrong and it can just like melt you down. Does that resonate with you at all? I imagine it's different subjectively for us, but
I think I think any athlete at a young age gets used to the reward of performance. Like, if you perform, that's good. And when you win, that's good. Right. So it's like praise based on performance. If you have parents that only praise you when you win. And then, I mean, it's different for everyone's like upbringing, or parents or whoever, your coach. Most of the time my coaches were so hard on me. Like, I didn't, even when I won, it didn't feel like I won because it was like, I did something wrong when I won. So it was like, you won that the wrong way and you're very bad. So I didn't get to,
Fuck.
there was no winning really.
God damn.
Yeah.
That must've been rough though. Like, how do you think that affected you as a kid? I mean,
in pretty much every way.
Yeah. I mean, you can go into however much or little you want to, but I'm curious.
I mean, before I started my business, I was perfectionist. Starting my business helped me unravel perfectionism because you can't get anything off the ground unless you go through just this phase of putting out. I mean, you're going through this right now, right? Creating this podcast. Like, you just have to put out stuff before you even know what it is, or you're proud of it, or you think it's ready for the world. You're just like, here you go. Like, this is going out on the internet. And it feels super cringe, or it did for me. It was like years of creating content and being like, hey, this is so embarrassing, but I know that I have a vision for it, eventually what it will be. So I think it resulted in perfectionism, which I was able to work on a lot. And yeah, just generally being hard on myself. I've had to learn self-compassion and kindness completely as an adult because I was so hard on myself for like through college, through my 20s.
Yeah, no, that's, I don't know. I feel like you and I like hit it off really quick because I feel like we have a lot in common. I feel like both you and I were very open with each other to begin with, but also like everything you're saying there, I'm just like, oh fuck yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
and the self-compassion piece, like how was that introduced to you, and like what was your, I'm curious the transformation. Like that's the sort of outlook I wanna look into, I guess.
Yeah, probably therapy. Probably that's where I started to learn it. And then my seeing people I was really close to, like family members, also go through therapy and then visibly change, like become more kind to themselves through their actions and behaviors. And just, yeah, kind of, I guess, yeah, I would say that.
Yeah. And so it sounds like you were introduced to it. Well, first of all, what were your first impressions of self-compassion?
My first impressions, I have to go back because I did a lot of sports therapy, like psychology. It was more training related therapy where, for example, I'd be hooked up to like all the sensors, and my therapist would make he would try to shock me during a session, like out of nowhere, like bang a pan or something, and then he'd start a timer and I'd have to like get my heart rate down as fast as possible to like a normal,
like performance related sort of shit.
I think it was like cognitive behavioral, but it was like all towards performance and mind body connection control. But we never went into things like like compassion or you would think that would be a part of it, but it was very like sciencey. And so my first intro to more of the, I guess, emotional things as an adult in therapy was during COVID. I got a little bit before COVID. And I think my first impressions were, well, first of all, I don't have enough of it towards myself or others. I think I was, as a solo athlete in a sport where I don't have teammates, I was in a very selfish place for most of my, you just are so alone in that sport. It's the you show. So I think it was an eye opener I was like, wow, I actually really need to work on this. Like thinking about myself, but in a different light, like in the compassionate light, and then also for other people. Because I think when you expand your compassion for yourself, you naturally do it for others too. Like there's just more empathy. There's more, like room for humanness in general, or kindness.
Yeah, no, that's a very similar path. Like when I was first introduced to self-compassion, I was like, this is fucking bullshit. Like,
Really?
yeah.
Why?
Not that, like, I guess I didn't hear of because self-compassion is like actually like is like researched and like and all that stuff. Now I think I heard of this like years ago, where it was just like just not even necessarily like the whole concept of self-compassion, but just the idea of being kind to yourself and loving yourself and all that. I was like, well, that's bullshit. Like,
yes,
or like you need to learn to love yourself before you can love anyone else. And it's like, well, yeah, but whatever, like that. I think just the idea of like coming back to myself was just always so counterintuitive. And to find out, to be exposed to that idea of increasing and the compassion you have for yourself, the kindness you have for yourself also enhances the compassion that you have for others, was counterintuitive, because it's just like, how does that make sense? Like, what, don't I need to give to others don't I need to like be thinking of others more often? But like you said, it's like, it's a natural progression whenever you're, well, it's like, I think of what you're talking about there, and something that I can also resonates really hard with me is the element of self-consciousness before all that. Like you're in a sport, like any sort of like performancing, I imagine like artists, musicians, anything where you're performing in some sort of way, you're being watched, enhances that feeling of self-consciousness that like, I need to think about the way I look, the way I behave, the way I speak, all these things. And that can be detrimental to a certain point, but also I don't know. I guess I just have this idea that builds a foundation for then when self-compassion actually gets introduced, you've already done a lot of work looking at yourself, but now you can look at yourself in a new light as like a friend and start to be like, well, I'm pretty okay. Like there's a lot of things about me that I like, and I'm really hard on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And also I imagine other people have got to be hard on themselves too. And we all just need a little bit more love. Like, and give that out. Like, is that something that, like, how's that manifested in your life? Do you think?
Well, I can relate to what you said. When I first heard it also, I was like, well, if I go soft, like I won't be as ambitious, or I can't achieve my goals because I'm like making excuses and letting myself be lazy. And that's not what self-compassion is, right? It's not like making excuses for yourself not to work out. I think that was my first impression, but how's it manifest in my life? I feel like this obviously self-awareness, but are you familiar with Young Pueblo's work at all?
It sounds, maybe you've mentioned them before. I'm not sure.
He's like a poet, a modern poet, and he wrote a book about his life. And his kind of thesis is that if we all did the inner work, like we started with ourselves, that would reflect in how we treat others, and the whole world would change. And I think, just going back to what you said, it is kind of counterintuitive. It's like, oh, if you focus on yourself, then that's ignoring everyone else. But it's like, if you really look at yourself and you're radically honest about who you are and your beliefs, and you know them, and you start to have more compassion for your own flaws, it just transfers to how you see everyone in your life. So yeah, I don't know. I guess and like you asked how it manifests. I think just, how I treat others, or if anything, it might be related to quality time is like my top love language. And I think it's made that even more important, because it's like who you are spending time with really matters. It really, whatever their inner world is like, it's going to rub off on your inner worlds, whether they share it with you or not, just by them taking up space in a room or how they are. And I think once I realized, wow, if you surround yourself with people who are unconscious, like have not done inner work, you might not grow, at a certain point. But if you select people to be in your life who have faced some of their fears, or are working, no one's finished, but are working on themselves, or curious, it helps you grow as a person. So I think it helped me reflect about, like, who am I surrounding myself with? What types of people do I want to be around? Like, what circles do I want to be in? Part of that's why I left New York and I'm in Austin now. So I think it manifested in a lot of ways. Or who do you want to choose as a partner or friends? All those things. Like, if someone's not curious about themselves or life, or like introspective, it's less appealing to have a friendship with them now these days, because we don't have a lot of time. So like, how you spend your time is it's the greatest gift, because we have so little of it.
Yeah, it's one of the most important decisions you make in any given moment.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this all sort of led to you being able to see people more clearly through this lens of, like you said, being unconscious or not. Because that's something I think about. I've been thinking about a lot lately, is how much time I've spent in my life just sleepwalking, just kind of going through the motions of like what I thought I was supposed to, based on this like idealized version of myself in my head, or external forces telling me what I, maybe directly or indirectly telling me what I should or shouldn't be, and that sort of thing. But it also, like, kind of going back to the compassion piece, it's like, for those who at least appear to be on the more unconscious side, like, I think that's where the compassion piece comes in really strong too, because it's like, it's not your fault. It's no one's fault that you're there. It's like my perception of it, at least, is like the experiences in your life have just not led to something that is like snapped with you, that's woken you up in a way.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times what ends up happening is that, like, at least with me, and it sounds like with you as well, is that like we reach a point where it's like, this isn't fucking working anymore. Like, and I need help. And you start to seek it, you start to look for that. And for you, it ended up being therapy. I think for me, it ended up being more like therapy was a part of it, but like just like talking to people. I feel like I got exposed to a lot of different ideas where I'm like, what the fuck? I can be nice to myself. Like that's a thing. like I can love myself. I can treat myself like a friend.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling, but I didn't actually have a question to follow up on that.
I have a response.
Okay.
I don't know if there has to be an event because I've been so blessed. I haven't had like much happen to me in my life. I've been really lucky. I haven't experienced a lot of loss or trauma. Everyone has their stuff. It's not like trauma's not comparable. That's not what I'm saying. But just like I didn't have an event. I think I just had it was like a itch to scratch. Like there was just curiosity that led me. Because I even remember going to therapy. There wasn't even necessarily. I was like, there was nothing I wanted to talk about, but I was curious like about what there might be to talk about. It was like, there's stuff I know I don't know, and I kind of want to know more about that stuff I don't know. And then I found out it was stuff like I didn't know, which is like a whole other like plane of existence of stuff. It was much more gradual. But yeah, I mean, and that's not to say also I wouldn't go around judging people who are like unconscious, right, versus conscious.
Sure.
And I think it does lend itself the compassion to those. Like I have more patience for people in general. I used to be really impatient growing up. But yeah, we're all just like humans doing our best with what we got at the end of the day.
We're just out here floating around in a fucking rock,
Yeah.
like, trying not to die, like
like literally.
And that's a crazy that's a perspective that I find interesting in itself. Is like sometimes I feel like I talk to folks who the idea of how small we are is like brings about unpleasant feelings, I guess. Like it's, you know, like there's existential depression. There's things that like we're like, why does it matter if we're just like, you know, a billion years from now we're not going to be around? What is the point of us all doing this? Why do we try so hard? Why do we go through this thing and all that stuff? And what is your stance there? Like what do you think?
I love asking people this question because you can tell it's such a divide. People who are scared of this topic versus people who really want to talk about it.
It's an understandably scary topic, though.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much I feel like I was always into this question or like this content, and in college what I studied was pretty related to it. It was basically like philosophy plus science, so it was going into this stuff all the time. I mean, I'm totally excited by it. I don't think the meaning of life changes much whether we are really important or not important at all. It's all like relative. It's what you decide. So to me, I don't know if there could be, I mean, I have to think like if, for example, with all of the conspiracy theories going on right now, one of them on TikTok being that
I just love that. Actually, the last interview I did with Alon, it ended in a conspiracy theory. Amazing. So I love that this is becoming a theme.
Yeah. There's this one that's like the aliens are right. They're already here. That whole conspiracy, but they actually live underground and they created us. So I think if it was like epistemology, where we come from, if where we come from, we got answers on that might change a lot. Like if I found out we were just a lab experiment and we had proof of that would definitely change the way I see the meaning of life. But I don't think it would remove its significance. I think since we are conscious to a certain extent, we don't know how conscious we are, but you can just decide what the meaning is.
Well, that I guess I want more clarity on like how do you conceptualize the meaning of life, and like how do you think that would change that?
That's a big question.
Fuck yeah, it is. Welcome to the podcast.
How would I conceptualize the meaning of life?
Yeah, like just how do you think about it? Like just how would you talk about it?
I would talk about it as I probably would veer towards we are like pretty insignificant, like a little blip in this time span of the universe, and nothing matters. but just because it doesn't matter, meaning I wouldn't say nothing matters. Nothing will be recorded or remembered, but just because it won't be remembered doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. That's how I think of it. It's like what you do does matter to you as you define it, your values for the time you spent here. And I think I would be more spiritually or like open-minded about maybe after death. I don't know, energy gets recycled. I don't know if we would ever come back. I don't know if I believe in like coming back necessarily, but
sure.
Yeah, I think there's probably no larger, well, I wouldn't say that. I think there's a larger picture. I think that the universe is alive in a way, and there is a creator. I don't know if it's God or whatever. There's some greater being or entity, or it's just the universe is alive itself. But we're not important. I just think we're like a little cog in this like much more beautiful, much bigger, expansive thing that we cannot understand and will never be able to.
Yeah, I like that though. Because that brings about thoughts of like, I love the idea of us being a way through which the universe can perceive itself. You know, like I can't remember when or how I heard that, but like that's something that's always stuck with me because like just the fact that like, I mean, going back to, you're talking a lot about curiosity and curiosity. Oh man, that's another, bringing it fucking full circle again, like back to kids are infinitely curious. And whenever you can find that with your adult brain where you can kind of like be more targeted and all that stuff and find something that's more meaningful to you, it can be so beautiful. And how wild it is that we are like amalgamations of particles that are just like, we're stardust, you know, like that. I love that perspective, and that have come together to be able to witness whatever the fuck it is we're doing here and then talk to each other about it.
Yeah, it's trippy.
It's nuts. And I've been getting more into like I want to learn more about it, but I think yoga in particular has exposed me a lot to like more Eastern perspectives of that. Do you have have you read or?
I just read Living in the Light by Deepak Chopra. My friend sent it to me. The first half is about yoga, but as a practice, not like the poses, like I don't know that much about it besides this book. So
yeah,
but just the mindset of it, or all of the mantras, or just the philosophy, if you will, or like practice of it, like kindness and, you know, energy being recycled, stuff like that. And then the second half of the book is literally just yoga poses, but yoga seems obviously so much more than just a bunch of poses. It has like a whole universe to it, and it dates back so far.
Do you do much yoga?
I went through a phase 2014 to 2016. I did it like every day, and then I burnt out and started lifting weights.
Okay, you've told me this before.
Yeah.
So what did you get out of yoga? Like, I'm just curious what your experience was like.
That was a time in my journey when I was still Olympic hopeful, and everything I did, I just did to win it. Like, this was before I was like 21. So this was before I went down that personal journey of like where I am now, I guess. Just, I wanted to win. I wanted to be the best at it. And yoga is interesting because like you can't be the best.
There's no winning at yoga.
Yeah, but I didn't understand that. I was like, I can do these inversions. I can do all this advanced stuff.
Right.
I completely missed the point for like 2 years. And then I was like, this is so boring.
I just imagine you just going hard as fuck in yoga and everyone's like, dude, I'm just trying to breathe and flow and shit.
Yeah, I missed the entire lesson, but I appreciate it looking back. I'm like, I did that wrong, but I'll go once in a while. I enjoy it.
Do you meditate?
I don't regularly as a practice, but I have logged a lot of time meditating. Like, that sounds like I'm bragging. I'm not. Like, it was an unhelpful amount.
How do you perceive that as a brag? Man, I've meditated for so much.
I've reached, what do they call it when you
enlightenment?
Yeah. No, I had to. My coach made me go to a Zendo, which is a Buddhist temple in Manhattan, and on the Upper East Side, I'd go and do Zazen meditation with actual Buddhas, like real Buddhas. It was pretty cool. But I would do like 4-hour long sits. They would like hit you if you fell asleep. It was a whole thing. And it was cool. Like I learned a lot, but I also burned out. I burned out on a lot of stuff during that time. Like I was intensely pursuing mental, like just mental acuity, like trying to be better at my sport and do anything I could to get an edge over my opponents. And that was a part of that journey. But I use like Headspace now when I need
Okay.
once a week. It's not a practice anymore, but it's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, shit. Like, there's so many. Through my practice of it, it seems like there is so many different ways that you can look at it, and depending on how you're looking at it and what you're pursuing through doing it, or not pursuing through doing it, is very indicative of what you get out of it, and that's pretty fucking cool in itself.
I feel like you could say that about anything.
True. Yeah.
I feel like that's what I've noticed most. And at this point, like thousands of women have gone through our programs. And the one thing I always tell women, and we have like a big orientation kickoff call with them, and it's weight loss related usually, or it's fitness related. The one thing I've noticed of these thousands of women, the women that achieve the goals that they want to achieve in the program, they get out of it what they put into it. There's no other way around it. It's like, it's going to be it's like a 1-to-1. Like what you put in is what you will get out. There's no magic beyond that. And it probably applies to a lot of things.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. But I guess the other piece that I'm thinking of is and maybe we are talking about the same thing and I'm just thinking of it differently, but the approach through which, or the perspective, the lens through which you are looking at something. Because like when we're talking about yoga, it sounds like you were looking at that through a performance, through a like I'm here to win at yoga lens. Whereas like when I first started yoga, it was multiple things. I think I was just sick of lifting. I've lifted since I was like 14, and I feel like I got to this point where I'm like, I don't like this. Like, I mean, I like what it does to my body. I like feeling strong and all that stuff, but I wanted to do something where I was like, getting more in touch with my body, and while also like, feeding it, you know what I mean? Like doing good things for it to make it feel strong. And the crazy thing is like, I feel stronger now than I ever have with like lifting and stuff like that.
So you're saying like what you put into it in terms of like the perspective or the intention you bring in will shape
intention's a good word.
Result.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I feel, and when you were saying like, you're like, oh, like that is with everything. And it really like, in both those things, like both like what you put, like the actual effort that you put into it, or like, I think those things, it's not like those are two, like the effort, like what you put into it effort wise and what you put into it intention wise are like mutually exclusive. Like there's a lot of crossover there that happens, and they're very related in what you get out of it, but there's some differences there.
I feel like worldview, that going back to compassion for others, thinking in that context, it's interesting, right? If you go, I've noticed this in my family a lot, we'll have really different experiences of the exact same event. Like we were all there and we all have a completely different story. And that has totally changed how I see people, because I don't believe some things there's a right and wrong or like a factual thing, but a lot of times it's just perspective. So it's like, if you can try to think of what is their worldview going into this experience, whatever the experience is, whatever they're going to take away or remember from it will be different than yours, because you're literally entering that experience with your whole own worldview, your whole own set of experiences, memories, and it's not right or wrong. It's just like realizing you have your own bias like that makes you realize everyone has their own bias. So like we're all just operating on these like pretty different planes, and it's the only way you're going to get overlap is if you kind of remember they have a different starting point than you. That's not better or worse, you know?
Yeah. The best part about all that, well, the best part is a little egotistical, but like that's like what this podcast is. Like that's like the what lies between, like that's the essence of like I think what lies between, if I were to put like one word to it, is truth or reality. And like we all have our different versions of whatever the fuck that is. Because exactly what you're talking about is one of my favorite things about doing this and hearing people talk about what they get out of it. And I think I might have mentioned this to you before, but just like hearing people be like, oh, like I watched the podcast. I'm like, what'd you think? And I'm just like, you know, obviously some of the conversations are like one's like 2 hours long, and you know what I mean? Like there's a lot to get out of it, but like what stuck with you, and even the different things that stick with people, but the experience of someone being like, I watched this part and this is what I got out of it. I'm like, oh, that's funny because when I had that conversation, that was not at all what I was thinking about. Like that wasn't like my intention at all. And that's amazing. And like you're saying, it says a lot about like how I think it says a lot about how little we know about what reality is, and like how we only get little glimpses of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hugely philosophical question. Like, is reality like material, or is it completely? It's like, oh, I feel like they've debated this forever, right?
Yeah.
Descartes, or like all of the philosophers going back on trying to prove what we can rely on to take as real versus not real. And most of the times I feel like we rely on our senses, but a lot of philosophers have said like you actually can't rely on any of your senses for a bunch of reasons. So then if we're not going off our senses, like what are we going off of?
Well, that's where I think the big thing is like, okay, within our society, we have set things up. The world that we have synthesized based on our perception and stuff, like those things are important. Yeah. Like I need to be able to like go into a job interview and I'm not going to be like, none of this is real. Like, you know, like I'm not going to get a job and I'm going to fucking starve, you know, like,
but this is where like the adulting, that's why we become like, we just we like all have this shared language that's just like made up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To survive, like you said earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And like language is just like, that's so fascinating to me in general, because like one of my favorite things to like, I just had this question come up in a book that I was reading that was like about like what came first, language or music, and like that sort of question in itself evokes a lot of thoughts about like what the fuck is language at all, like, and that progression of it. Because you think about like, my thought is that like, and this is a sort of borrowed argument, but that like music would have had to have come first before like language, in the sense of like forming words that have very distinct meaning, because like we were able to make like sound and stuff like that.
Oh, like melody or percussion, like rhythm or like humming.
Yeah, like I guess anything to where, I guess melody more, anything that conveys like something. And that's the thing is like, as I even talk about this, I'm like, are they kind of the same thing, but they like speak in different ways? It's like they're just different languages in a way.
Basically an expression that conveys some information without words.
Yeah. But there's so much more, like we can speak so much more precisely with language.
Right.
But we can speak so much more with more depth and more breadth. Yeah. With music.
There's also things music can say that don't have words.
Yeah, like convey feelings or like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there I go. I was like just going to try to describe it, and I'm like, you just can't. Like there aren't the words to do it.
Yeah, I think that's the coolest thing about music is like you hear something that you cannot like put into words, and then on a group level, if a lot of people feel the same way when they hear that one song, I feel like that's what makes a concert so cool, you know?
Ooh, even that, or that everyone's having their own individual experience that is like part of the whole. Like there's a whole to the experience, but each individual person, it's probably a little bit, well, it's got to be like different in terms of like the physical sensation of it, like what thoughts are going through their head, like what they're well, actually I feel like that's where the similarities come in, is like the expression, like the dancing, the move, like that idea or that phenomenon of like I don't know, this happens to me a lot whenever I see someone dancing in a way that I'm like, they just look free. I'm just like, I end up like imitating them in a way. Yeah. And I feel like that happens in that like sort of mob mentality, or.
Yeah. It's like contagious.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this. I went to a Rufus Du Sol concert for the first time a few months ago. Do you listen to them?
I'm not familiar now.
They're like, they're electronic, but they're not EDM hardcore festival vibes, but they're very melodic, and I'd say their songs are pretty emotional. And I was listening to the musicians talk about one of their songs called Inner Bloom. It's a really famous song, and they didn't even know I think they performed it for the first time live to an audience before they released it on like an EP or an album. And they said they described it as like the whole audience, they just knew they had created it. Just the reaction on like a mass, on like at scale was palpably like people were feeling something really big. And then it became one of the most famous songs in electronic music. People have tattoos of this song. Like, it's nuts how many people are obsessed with this song. But there's something like intangible or indescribable about that song for a lot of people that no one can really, I guess you can try to put it to words, but it doesn't ever really do it justice, you know?
Yeah, like it created such a deep visceral experience that goes beyond words, but just is, it also sounds like it like, I was going to say memorable, but it sounds like it goes beyond that. Like, it's just
Yeah.
a connection on a level that you just don't get to experience very often.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a musician or anything, but I feel like that's one of the biggest points of music. Or poetry does a good job of capturing things too, right? That are hard to describe, but they use words, but it like conveys such a strong emotion, or just like the mood of a poem, or like the ambiance of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the power of metaphor
Yeah.
is a huge one. Do you write poetry?
Yeah, I do.
I think you've told me about this before. What is that? That's your like creative outlet?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, a lot of my job is, some of it is creative.
Oh, sure.
But from a personal level, yeah.
What do you do with them?
Like, absolutely nothing.
Well, tell me. I'm curious. Tell me more about this. About like, where did it begin?
I always wanted to be a writer as a kid, and I just write a lot. I write all the time, every day. I want to write fiction, but I always
should
just
talk to Alex more. He's a fiction writer.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I should talk to him. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
No, he's a very talented fiction
Wow.
writer. He's working on a book right now that's really fucking good.
Whoa.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
anyway.
I would love to. Yeah. I don't take my writing very seriously. It's just sort of an outlet for me.
Huh.
And what's nice is I don't know, right? I feel like if you're writing professionally, you have to write when you're not in the mood. Like, even when the emotion's not there, you're like practicing writing. I only do it when like I have an idea or inspiration strikes. It's pretty, in terms of poetry. So there's no structure to it or discipline. It's just like, you know, I go through something in life, and then as I'm processing it, if I have the urge, I'll start writing about it. And now I have, what's kind of fun for me is I just have a collection of poems from like very specific life events or like chapters to look back on, which is, I don't know, I like that part of it, of just having like, and it expresses what I went through in that way, in ways that like a journal entry can't, or like, I don't know, video or other things.
Yeah.
Because it just captures the emotion of the time, which is hard to recreate when you're, I don't know, or hard to put yourself back in that place in your life if you've already processed it and you're not there emotionally anymore, you know?
Mm-hmm. Is that sort of how that, what that has been to you mostly, is like a reflection sort of thing, or a recording of your states in a way, and something to reflect on later, or
sort
express
of
it?
I did. In like, when I was a kid, I started a Tumblr and I published all my poetry, and I kept it completely anonymous. And that was the first time I ever shared my poetry with the internet. It's probably still out there, but it's like an anonymous blog.
And do some fucking sleuthing
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. And it really, I feel like I connected with other people through it, and that was something I had never felt before. And that was cool. So once in a while, I'll share it with friends or something if it's relevant to something I think they're going through in life. But for the most part, yeah, I don't do anything with them. They just chill in my notes app or my journal or whatever.
Yeah. But you were saying, maybe I misinterpreted this, but were you saying that you will look back on them?
Yeah, I do look back on them.
Okay.
Definitely. Especially because I feel like the further you get away from a life event, your memory is not reliable. So you start to make things up or remember it differently, or maybe sometimes like idealize it or think of it as, I don't know, there's so much happens in memory. So yeah, sometimes if I'm like, I don't know if it really like went that way for me or how I thought it went that way, reading that stuff can help me like get back in that like point of view.
Have you ever had the experience of reading back on something and it changing meaning?
Yes.
Oh, fuck yeah. I like that look.
No, it's so definitely, because a lot
Tell
of
me about it.
I think this is where it's like there is not really, this is the same thing as getting like a tarot reading. Whatever they say, you will find a way to relate it to your life in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
It's the same with poetry, kind of like what I would write. I could write it from this place where I'm say I'm writing about a relationship or something, and it's in the relationship's in a good place. The poem will read a certain way to me, but then say something happens, it's not good, and then I'm reading it back. I'll find things in that poem that seem like you can make meaning out of it. I didn't even know, like stuff that seems almost like predictive of what was going to happen, or like I have this like deeper intelligence that my body knew, and it's just like what your brain is going to be looking for.
Sure.
So it's really interesting. Most of what I've written, I look back on and I'll find like a new perspective on it, which is kind of what like a lot of poetry does for people, is it brings up different memories or experiences based on like whoever's reading it.
Yeah. And it's like like it sounds like it's hard to discern whether or not is there something profound going on here, or is my mind just biasing towards whatever it is I'm happening to go, or is it both, or is it those things combined plus like whatever the fuck else is going on that I don't understand?
So that's really the question. Yeah.
So that's like, I think there was this has kind of been happening to me recently, where I used to just have this idea that there was no value in like rewatching things or like rereading things or doing it. It's like, oh, I've already seen it. It's like, well, and I think that phenomenon in itself, like sort of being a future predictor, thinking that we're clairvoyant. I think that's something that in a way are at least in talking to a lot of folks, I don't want to speak for everyone, but that we have a tendency to think that like we know what's going to happen. Like, oh, I'm not going to go like talk to this person. I already know they're going to say this, or like this, that, and the other. I feel like that's a sort of related phenomenon, but like that's also the same thing that makes us think that, like, for example, this room, I've been in this room many, many a times. This is my bedroom, I've been living here since April, but it's never looked like this before, ever.
What do you mean, like right now?
Yeah. And it's never looked like this before, and never will look like this ever again, because everything in this world is constantly changing and nothing's ever sitting still. But that's one of the illusions that our minds love to. It's adaptable, right? It allows us to see things in our environment that are that stand out, that are different, that are threats, that are potential resources, or whatever the case may be. But it also like distances us from reality in a way.
Right. It's looking for anomalies, is what you're saying?
Yeah, in a way, like it has a way of familiarizing things in a way, like when I look at my bed over here, right? Like it looks the same as it always does, right? But like actually, if you think about it on a molecular level, or like the air in this room, like there's never been like the same air molecules in this room that were like this. Right. Like, and everything is very different. Everything is constantly. We are made up of more empty space than we are matter. Mm-hmm. Like, and all of our perceptive systems trick us into thinking that like this is just what this is, and that's, like I was saying, like that's useful, but it divorces us from reality in a way. I kind of forgot where I was going with this, but
did I share with you that crazy study about I think I did, but I'm going to repeat it because it's really interesting. There is a study that, I hope it's a real study. I'm pretty sure it's real.
It'd be great if you're just making shit up.
My source is not TikTok, I promise. But basically they had everyone like in this study wear goggles that turned the orientation of the environment upside down, and they had to wear them for 24 hours. And it took within 24 hours, the brain rewired the environment back to normal, back to right side up, even though they were still wearing the glasses that everything was upside down.
That's nuts.
It's nuts. So like the brain completely knowing gravity, like remapped the environment so that they could navigate it. And it only took a day for the brain to do all that work. And they were literally seeing something that they were not actually seeing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is mind blowing.
Yeah. And that like, oh, that like, that, I think that is a very, like salient example of exactly what I'm talking about. And then that's what I wanted to relate it to was the value of like re-experiencing things that like might seem redundant or whatever. Like, what's going to happen is like the amount of times I've listened to a song, especially recently, where like I've heard this song a million times, and I've listened to this particular line a million times, and it comes across and it'll hit me and I'll be like, I've never heard it like that before. That's fucking insane. Like that's insane to me. And I think that idea, like once I realize like how much value it is there, like I think it helps contribute to that perspective of like, I don't know, I think we talk about it in terms of like the beginner's mindset, or like tapping into your childlike self, because kids, like everything's new, everything's amazing, everything's beautiful, and those same things that allow us to survive in this world sort of suck the life out of things too, the beauty out of things. But as adults, if you can tap into that and you can really like, I mean, that's something I'm kind of obsessed with, is like, how do I activate that like perspective more often?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts there on that, like that sort of perspective?
Yeah, I think that's what I feel like the last few years I've just decided that's pretty much in everything I do. I want to activate play, or like just not seriousness. Like I don't want to take anything that seriously anymore. It seems silly to me. Like things should be fun and silly, and not every time someone asks you a question, you don't have to answer like seriously. You could just make a joke. Like, I was gonna say though, have you ever listened to a song that you've listened to a million times, and then you hear a lyric, and for some reason you just never, like maybe you even know the words, but you never thought about the words, and then you hear, I'm not a lyrical person, so sometimes I listen to music, I hear the melody, not the words, and then years later I'll hear the words in the song, and it totally changes the meaning of the song for me, or even the way it sounds.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at before, and I wish I had a good example of that. Do you have any off the top of your head?
Yeah, I'm forgetting the lyric now. My recall is so bad. It's the worst.
We can also listen to it because we have headphones.
It's a K-Tronada song. It's okay. I'm not gonna be able to. But yeah.
You don't want to sing it for me?
No. Nobody needs to suffer through that or listen to that today. But yeah, no, it was just like one line in it that then kind of just changed the like what the song meant to me, and also like the mood of the song too. It was interesting.
Yeah, that happened. That's an example just came to my mind with I can't remember I know it's like Jay Daly or Jay Dealey or something like that, and the Grouch. It's a hip hop song, and I say hip hop. It's of that ilk, and it's called Clean. The song's called Clean, and one of the lines goes a little something like, I used to cry for help, now I just cry on my own now. And that that actually I think is a great example of exactly what you're talking about, where I've heard those words, but I'd never heard them. Like I never really like heard them. And it really like said to me like I used to cry for help. Like when we're children, we cry for help. Like that's the function of crying, like is to let people know we're in pain, we're hurting right now, we need help. Like But now I just cry on my own because it's like shameful. It's like we're not supposed to show, like as adults, we're supposed to just suck it up and deal with it. We're not supposed to show people our pain like that. And I think like as someone who's like, shit, over the past 4 or 5 years discovered how powerful, like, I mean, we were talking about this earlier, how powerful like vulnerability can be, like leaving yourself open, like, and how it evokes vulnerability and authenticity in others. And just enables like a really deep connection with someone, because you can be like, you're showing me something that is that's hard, that's personal, that you're, and because like everyone knows how the vulnerable feeling of like crying in front of someone, like, or being upset, being at your quote unquote worst in front of someone. And like, I don't know, I think those sort of things, like, it really, it's like someone could just like when I just say those words, it doesn't really, it can mean all those things. I have to sit here and explain it, right? But in those lines, like everything that I just explained and more is said in there, and that's music. Like,
yeah,
isn't that insane though?
That's a really good example.
Yeah. Well, shit. That's like, I don't know. That's something I'm kind of just like obsessed with, and I think of why I'm going more in the direction of like wanting to learn more about Eastern perspectives. Because I mean, here in the West, we like, I want to go do the psychology route and learn as much as I can in that, but like the crossover between like the Eastern and Western, I think says a lot about how we perceive the world. Like, if you ever get, I think I've told you about this book before. You ever get a chance to read The Master and His Emissary, it will blow your fucking mind.
Oh, no, I haven't. I don't think you told me about that one. What is it about?
It's a neuroscientist who goes into like the differences in the left and right cerebral hemispheres, and all that.
That's cool.
And how it's influenced our world. Like, oh, just some of the parallels he draws is incredible. But yeah, that's one where like I constantly, like, it's like it's caused me to divide up, like whenever I'm seeing from well, let me back up. A lot of what he talks about is like the way that the left hemisphere perceives the world, its directives, its motives, and sort of like that, and the right. And then I can, like, in any given moment be like, oh, like I'm seeing through that sort of perspective. What is that good for? What is that useful for? And I find that like most of the time I'm in the left. That's more like, I would say it's like, it's sort of going back to what we were talking about before with like survival, being in society, like norms, all the things that we've synthesized within this world. And then there's like reality, which what he argues is like the right hemisphere is more attuned with, and its language is like metaphor and like all those things, to where like those few lines mean something completely different in a song than they do when just like spoken.
Right.
And that sort of thing. It's just an insane concept.
Yeah.
It's very dense too.
Yeah. Has the Eastern world, like the stuff that you're looking into now, is that at all related to the body as well? Like sort of like the intelligence that the body stores, or like, I think we talked about the body keeps a score at some point.
Yeah,
or is
I
this
think
a different like interest that you're exploring?
Well, the body keeps a score is a great example of like the crossover between like Eastern and Western sort of perspectives. But I think the Eastern perspective, and granted, like I'll just say the caveat that I don't know a ton of this. I'm very early on in my education of these things and learning about these things, but like chakras are a big part of it. And like shit,
Right.
if you had said the word chakras to me 5 years ago, I'd go, shut the fuck up. Like, you're full of shit. Like, I don't want to hear your woo garbage bullshit about stuff. But the more that I explore these things, the more that I'm like, and open myself to, I don't know, and just feel. Like when you just feel, and I don't need to know, like I don't need to rationalize, I guess. I just know, like through that feeling. I'm just like, and hearing other people talk about their experience with it, I'm like, that shit's real. Like there's some shit fucking going on here.
I know.
That like they've been talking about for fucking centuries, you know? Like, and that's so insane to me, because I used to think like, oh, like they didn't have science back
Me
then.
too.
Like, you're saying.
Oh yeah, no, I used to like be like, I'm not woo woo. Like, I'm not that. Like I was so rejecting of it, but yeah, I mean, I'm still not woo woo, but I'm very
I
open
love
minded.
woo woo in general. Like, I
Yeah.
love that word. Just
Yeah.
like a fucking.
It's like a category of things. Yeah. Yeah, it's silly. I definitely agree with you though. I think if more than anything, I've just become way more comfortable and open to the idea that we just don't know anything. So I can't
Yeah.
like eliminate woo woo stuff anymore. It's like
Right.
that is probably just as good a guess as the science stuff at this point. Like, or
Yeah.
it's like somewhere in between.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's like I think science allows us to do so many things within our society. Like it allows us to manipulate the world a lot that it gives
Yeah.
us the impression like we know some shit. And
Mm-hmm.
we do know some shit. But the I think like the more that I lean into the other side of it, I'm just like exactly what you're saying there. It's like we like as much as we think we know, that is a drop in the bucket of the fucking universe that is infinite.
Yeah, we know nothing.
We throw around the word infinite a lot, but we can't even fathom what infinite
Mm-hmm.
looks like. You know, we have all these measures and stuff like you could fit a fucking billion, trillion, gazillion suns within our solar system, and that's just a blip on the, you know, all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. There's, you know, I could go on, but like to think of the vastness of that, and again, going back to the like the thoughts of like existentialism and all that, like it's hard once you really think about that, it's hard to fathom that we do know much about anything
Yeah, it
or
becomes
to cancel those things out.
yeah, it's silly. It's like silly.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. The idea of us knowing anything just is yeah, it just seems really silly to me.
Yeah. But I mean, we can do some cool stuff with it. Like we can
Yeah.
metaverse and do shit like that.
Yeah.
I want to change gears a little bit because this is a question that's been on my mind, especially as like I've been trying to figure out ways to connect with people over like through content and social media and all this stuff. Like this is one avenue of it, but like even just like recording myself and just like putting shit out there and being whatever. And it also goes back to like, you know, ties in like authenticity and all that. Cause whenever I watch your content, like there's no difference between who I see on, not to say there's no difference, but you just seem like your authentic self, like in those things. I'm curious how you get to that point because you were talking earlier about how like in the beginning it was just like, oh, this is cringe, this is weird and stuff. Like, what does that journey look like?
That's a compliment. That's nice. I've heard it before actually from just members in our community, and I genuinely don't know what it would be like to. I don't know another way. I don't know how I would show up differently than I do online. I don't know. I mean, I'd say in the beginning it felt cringy because I was not yet comfortable being seen. Like I didn't want to put myself on the internet in any way, shape, or form 7 years ago, let alone like in bikinis or like in the fitness era, like that type of content. But I just had this vision to build something a lot bigger than myself. And so I managed to I kind of separated myself from it. Like anything I was going to share, I was like, my story is meant to help other women. So it doesn't really matter what my story is. Like it doesn't matter if I look bad on camera on a certain day or I don't know. I just kind of let go of that. I was like, yeah, it's not going to be perfect. I'm not going to feel good about a lot of the content, but I just was able to have a bigger, like a 10-year vision of what I wanted the business to be, how I wanted to help people, how I wanted to connect with people online. And it required me just showing up somehow, like just showing up in whatever way I could on a daily basis for like 6 years. And that's why I leave all my content up. Like if I look at my first YouTube video, it's the most cringe thing I've ever seen in my life.
Fuck, I'm definitely checking
so
that shit out.
I look at it, I'm like, is that even me? It's so bizarre, but I just leave it up because I'm like, people are still watching it and it's helping someone. So I don't care. Like, I don't care what, you know? But yeah, I don't know. I wish I had a better answer. It's what comes naturally. I could not show up differently online if I tried.
Yeah.
Like if someone was like, be a not version of you, I'm like, what would I even do? I cannot act. I've always felt very uncomfortable in like theatrical, like theater. Like I just can't, I'm like, that gives me I don't want to do that. I don't want to put on a costume and I just want to show up like how I am.
It makes me wonder if, because sometimes I don't know, it makes me wonder what the difference is between those who like seem inauthentic
Yeah.
or whether and those who do, and whether that's like actual inauthenticity, or if that's even a good word to describe it, or if it's or if there's something going on there, or if it's just like a subjective perception, you know.
I will say I think the internet does not do a good job of representing an entire human. Like my presence on the internet, like this content is wildly different from what I would normally talk about. And the internet in my community only knows me through one lens. And so if people meet me, and I've noticed this, who've only followed me online for a while, and then we meet, I think they have a completely different, it's not that I was inauthentic, right, online. It's just like I also have a whole life, obviously, and a whole other interests outside of fitness. But that's all I'm going to talk about on that page that's dedicated to fitness. So I think it's hard to go online and show up. Like, not a lot of people are known for many things. People are known for one thing. And that's why so many pages are very singular. The ones that do really well and like go viral, or people who generate, like build followings, they do one thing and they just repeat it over and over again. And it's very simple. It's like, oh, this is that guy. He's known for organic, like dog food that he makes. And it's just like the same video. And he's like, it's really niche. And you could show up authentically in one way over and over again, but there's also a million things you're leaving out too.
Yeah, it honestly, everything you're saying there really just tells me how like the external perception of authenticity falls short of what it actually is.
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it. Because I've also heard like when you say, oh, you show up authentically online, I'm like, I feel like it's me. Definitely. It is me, but it's like one part of me. So I'm not even sure if it's like, there's a lot that's left out of like by omission.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that hurts the authenticity of it. I don't think, maybe it doesn't, but it's definitely like a narrow picture of something.
That's interesting, because as a thought that comes to mind as you're saying that is maybe part of, I wonder what my perception of, I kind of wish I had watched some of your content before I got to know you more. Like when I was just your cat sitter, you know, which I just still love. Like, I love our origin story. It's pretty great.
So good.
But I wonder, because I think I may have like checked out a couple of your videos or something, like when we initially followed each other on Instagram and stuff. And but I wonder how much my knowing you, and how much like from the get-go you and I were very just straight up with each other, and just like it felt really good and all that, like that's contributing to that perception.
Yeah, that's true. Because I feel like you did get to know me in person before, a little bit at least. Online. Yeah.
Well, I also find that I unless it's content that's about things that I'm particularly interested in, that like I don't like, I wouldn't watch your content, because it's not, it turns out I'm not a short girly, you know, like
you're not 5'2" and trying to get in shape and a woman.
I'm literally the exact opposite of that, like on the opposite end of the spectrum. Also, I love how much you use the word girly. Like that's one of my favorite words, honestly.
Are you serious?
Yeah, well, it's so much fun. Like, I feel like both men and women have like, there's things that like boy sounds like really cool after, and like, or it just rolls off the tongue and it feels good. And there's things that girly like sounds really really good like after, and they like, there might be some crossover, like I'm a sweaty boy. That's something I throw out a lot. Like, a sweaty girl still works, but it doesn't sound as good.
Sweaty girly works though.
Yeah, it does. I love Girl
Makes it
Boss
cute.
too. Girl Boss is a great one.
One.
That one's mostly in like satire, because it's just funny. But fuck, what were we talking about again? Oh yeah. Okay. So actually, going back to authenticity online,
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Well, I guess let me just ask this. What would you want people who only know you as petite girly fitness lady, badass entrepreneur, to know about who you are outside of
Nothing.
that? Yeah.
I'm good with them just knowing me as that,
Hmm.
because I am interested in building a movement and a business, not a personal brand. I do have a personal brand, but I see the movement and the community and the mission much bigger than me. Like, it's not about me. So I don't really care. They don't need to
Oh, okay.
know everything about me or anything. I just want them to feel seen in, like, I want it to be a reflection and a means for them to work on their life and improve themselves and get the education they need to understand their body and their metabolism and their health. So yeah, I don't care at all. And that's part of why it's made it easy to put myself on the internet. Cause I'm like, I genuinely don't care at this point.
So when you have those interactions, it doesn't really phase you. You're like, well, that's what I want. I don't want you
Yeah.
to, I want this to be an outlet for you to like live your best life, and
Yeah.
however that works.
Yeah, especially because I know I can, if I want to, like later in life, I want to write fiction. I will just go write fiction. If I need to write it under a different name, I don't think I'd even need to do that. But I can't see any reason why I can't go do other things if I'm just known for this. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it being really limiting. And I don't have a need to be known for like a bunch of other things either. I think I'm extroverted at this point in my life, but for a long time I was pretty introverted. And so I would just prefer the privacy. But yeah, I don't know. This probably at this point in my life, the petite fitness movement is my greatest passion, it's when I wake up in the morning, it's what I'm so excited to work on the business. And, I mean, I'd be thrilled if that was the singular message that came across for people.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, like that's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the close people in my life, like closer relationships, those people need to know the rest of the things, right? Like I want to be seen for all that I am by the people that
Right.
matter. And then like in my daily face-to-face interactions, but online, I don't need them to know like the deeper things or yeah, personally.
That's that's such an interesting perspective, because I like, I don't know. I think that's something that I struggle with a little bit, in terms of like, I think everything that I do, all the things that are connected with my passions are so personal to me, that like, I don't think like, I guess I don't, not that I couldn't do this, but like I didn't even consider like separating those things in a way. I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but like I don't know. It's bringing up all these thoughts of like maybe I've been looking at this from the wrong angle of sorts.
I think what you're getting at is identity, because if you identify with the things that you're putting out, I think it becomes you're a harsher critic of it. If you're like, this is who I am, but because it's a business, I've worked really hard to separate my material things, money, my achievements. That's not my identity. I've had to work so hard on that as an athlete. Like anything I win, achieve, work at, that's not who I am. It's something that I do or something that I'm proud of, but not me. There's definitely been like a separation of like, okay, this is my content, but it's not my identity. This is my social media, but it's not my identity. It's a business. It's bigger than me. It's, can hopefully one day not be so attached to me and represent petite women everywhere. But yeah, I've had to work hard to like separate my identity from the online persona, or like I don't know, the position of it, I guess.
Yeah.
If it was purely passion projects and not a business, I think it would feel way harder to do that, because then it would purely be like your reasoning for doing it changes. So you're like doing it because for you almost, or I'm not doing it for me, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. It really, yeah. It's just making me like you talking about this is making me examine me further, which is fucking great. Like that's one of my favorite things about other having people in my life. Um, cause like actually, let's go this way. I'm curious what you're talking about identity. What how do you think about your identity then?
I think it over the years I've always had a fear of being put, this is ironic actually. I have a fear of being put in one box, like a
Mm,
massive fear, which is hilarious because I just got done telling you that I don't mind being in one box. But it's like one box. It's like really about caring about what people think of you or not. That's what it comes down to because I
okay.
know I'm not fitting in one box. If other people want to think I fit in one box, that's fine with me because I know I'm not. I have a bunch of things that maybe right like we have I think of identity now as a bunch of parts that coexist and some of them even contradict, which adds so much complexity to human life. And some of it is more cohesive and actually complementary, but it's so hard to distill someone down to one of their parts. It's like we're
Right.
so complex, there's so many different things, and that so I'd say I have just a more appreciation for parts of myself that are in conflict or even parts that I didn't like of myself when I was younger that I now accept and love rather than reject. It's like, okay, those have been integrated and I can appreciate those parts too. They're not all of me, but they're a part that play a role or like influence.
Hmm.
So it's more in my mind of like a web. And I try to think about that when I'm getting to know other people too, because it's so easy to get into a mindset of like you kind of think you know someone, but it's like I have like a whole life and experiences and so many parts that take so much time to see that yeah, it's very hard for me to just look at one person and be like, this is all you are. Like this is what
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and not to mention the things that you will never see or that
Exactly.
they will never see of themselves.
That is huge.
One of the I took a cognitive psychology class, and this is something that at the time I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it was like he was trying to get us to like wake up in a way. It was like trying to, he was basically at the beginning of the class, he was like, first day, he was like, this class, I'm going to try to convince you that everything that you experience is an illusion.
Ooh.
And one of the things that I can't remember, I think we were talking about perception. Um, it doesn't matter, but one of the things that one of the sort of ideas that he posed, that is, it's from a very big name in cognitive psychology research that I can't remember, but it was basically like something to, it's all about the, we talked about this before, the Gestalt. I think it's just called the Gestalt, like, or the Gestalt perception or something like that. That um, the sum of the parts is not the whole. The sum of the parts is something, or I'm sorry, the sum of the parts is not the whole. The whole is something completely different.
Oh.
And that sort of, and at the time I was like, cool, like that's great. But now as I go on, like as I've lived just more life and had more experience, the meaning that sort of what that says to me is exactly what we're talking about here. And like there are just things like all this web of like who we are, if we're talking about just ourselves, like the parts that you were just talking about, the parts of ourselves that say that you see of yourself, and you see more of your parts than anyone else can see, right? There are still things that you're missing. So if you were to take all the parts that you're seeing and put them all together, that is not the whole. That's something completely
Yeah.
different. And that's
Ooh.
fucking cool in itself. Like, and it's not even that that's really all that, like that idea in itself. Like you can't really do anything with that, but it's a perspective. Like,
Right.
and I think that's the takeaway.
Yeah, no, that's blowing my mind a little bit. Yeah.
Fuck yeah, we're in the
Yeah.
right place then.
That is a really cool thing to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what we do with that,
No, I don't
but
know.
that's pretty dope.
How do you see identity?
How do I see identity? I think, honestly, I asked that question and I was like, in my head, I was like, I've never actually fully thought about this myself. Like, I haven't conceptualized a lot of these things. or like written them down. Like they're sort of just abstractions in my head. Like, yeah, I know like the parts, you know, in a way, like I can name a bunch of the parts. But well, let me see if I can come up with something on the spot. Like, I think of my identity in terms of values. Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. Because I think where I've arrived at now and the way that I lead my life is that I have these values, these things that are important to me. And I'm constantly gauging whether or not my behavior and just the things that I do in this world that have any sort of impact, whether on me or other people, are in line with those values or not. And the thing that I like about that is that is the flexibility of it. It's flexible, but it's directed. Like values are things that they're not like goals. Like you're never gonna reach them. They're not attainable, but you can like it's like an asymptote. You know, you can get closer and closer to, or you can stray away from them. And what I've noticed is that like when I look back on my life, the times when I was in the most turmoil was when I was really far away from what was important to me. When the things I was doing were just like not in line with what is important to me. And shit, like up until maybe a few years ago, I probably couldn't even tell you what was important to me. I couldn't really like name them. So that's a big part of it. And I think that sort of flexibility, while it's useful in terms of like it is the perception that allows me to take these things that could be like the unpleasant things and be like, you're welcome. You belong here. You are part of me. I love you too. Like there's not, I don't love you any more or less than any of, well, I don't know. I don't know if I've gotten there yet. Because sometimes I'm like, I do love the feelings of joy a lot more than than the feelings of depression, you know, like, but I'm getting to a place where I do love those things. And I think it allows for that. The problem that it poses is that I think whenever, like the sort of going back to what you're talking about in terms of like the thing, your business, the stuff, you doing this thing that's important to you. Like it sounds like there's your ability to compartmentalize it allows you to direct it more and still maintain authenticity and do all these things, but then separate those things. All of my shit is mashed together, I feel like.
Interesting.
And right now I don't mind that.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's a drawback or whatever, but
no, something that's coming to mind hearing that is like, it's interesting because to me values are, it sounds like if you think about identity as what are the things about you that stay the same, that don't change with time, and values is something that can change, but most likely is like a very sticky, not influenced by time. Usually it's like a character thing almost.
Yeah, they're pretty stable.
Yeah,
there might, because I think once they become values that are like once they become like true values where like I can see them clearly, I can like I know exactly like yeah, that's very true. It's like those values won't change, I don't think, but they could be added to. Yeah, that's an interesting, oh Jesus, that's a cool way of thinking about that.
Yeah, when time is a factor in the idea of identity, because it kind of has to be in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how it's thought of in a psychological sense. Those relatively stable aspects of yourself that that influence your just experience of this world.
Yeah,
you know, that differentiate you from others.
But then it's also like nature versus nurture. Like, what is there an inherent identity you have, say like before you're born or like right when you're born, versus like what the world gives you that you then turn into an identity? Like, is there Is there a distilled version of you that's pre-world experience?
I love that question because something I think about a lot lately is like those things that are innate. Those are
Yeah.
like those universally human things, and a question that had popped in my head earlier that didn't feel right to ask in the moment, but feels great right now, which is, I don't know, that's a cool thing in itself, but, is that, when we were talking about, it had something to do with like the feeling of like that something, like you couldn't really identify it, but like something, there's a pull towards something in your life. And I feel like one of those things is truth. And the trouble with truth is that it's similar to love in that it's used in very many different contexts and all that. But I think love and truth are two of those things that are innate human qualities. Like we're drawn towards truth, and truth being the nature of reality. Like what, not like it's true that, I don't know, like in a physics sense, or like lies and truths and stuff like that, but like objective truths of reality.
Yeah.
And love like are two things, like, or the need for those things, the pull of those things.
Yeah. That's a really good insight. Just what's true for like humanity as a whole, like the connecting, or the unifying traits.
Yeah, unifying is a great, I love thinking about that. This was a thought that came to me earlier too, when you were talking about the compartmentalizations. And I'm thinking about it in terms of like what we're doing here, and like what, like it's truth seeking in a way. But I'm trying to figure out a way to like, to convey like that idea of, singularity of,
Sure.
like, do you think about that much? Like, is that something that comes into your world?
In terms of like the human experience?
Yeah, or just like the singularity of the universe are just very like, I don't know, you've done mushrooms before. Like it's hard not to think about those things.
Like the oneness.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, definitely easier to tap into that when you're on mushrooms.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's, I mean, I think there's like a spiritual, well, it's like the idea we're all the same, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's nothing that special about, or that different about people at its core.
Do you spend much time thinking about that?
Probably not.
I'm obsessed with it right now.
Are you?
Yeah.
You're on like
in a way, yeah. I mean, there's other shit going on, but like that's something that's constantly popping in my head.
How is it coming up for you? Like in what capacity?
A lot of times just with meditation and like,
oh, sure.
And I think the seeing ourselves in others, like the usefulness of it, because like it's an interesting philosophical question, but like I really I think I just identify very hard or very strongly with like, or my purpose in this world. If I were to even like name a purpose, I feel like it is to like touch as many people as possible and be like, this shit's happening. Like we are one, like we don't need to hate each other. Like we can, I don't know, love, like with like bringing people interconnectedness and that sort of thing. I just like, I don't know. That's the shit that like, whenever I've had some like very powerful experiences of feeling that while stone cold sober, and just like, and that like being the strongest feelings of just like togetherness with like the universe and other humans. And whenever it contributes to a perspective of like, whenever I see someone doing something that like I would traditionally see as like ugly or like not appropriate or whatever it is, I'm just like, goes back to compassion, you know?
Yeah. Come to think of it, I feel like I thought about it a lot as a kid and less now. Because as a kid, I grew up in this town that had no light pollution. and the stars were a huge part of my childhood. Like you could see the Milky Way from my backyard. There was just nothing out there. And I used to think about how we all see the same sky a lot as a kid, and that's just it's kind of like romanticizing it, but it's like even if you're in a really different perspective, like you're still all looking at the same, kind of witnessing like the beauty of the universe in some way at some point. Or, like you could say that about the ocean or a lot of different things.
I love that. I love that so much. I love that because that's something that's a reoccurring theme that comes up when like I talk to folks, or whenever I go experience these things myself and I talk to people about it. Like we all have some sort of connection. Like when we get into a place in nature where we get to be around these huge, powerful forces of nature that make us feel so small, like the stars, like the ocean, like mountains, huge forests, like
it's like wonder.
Yeah.
Right? It's the feeling of wonder. Yeah. Which is a very human thing, like an innately human thing.
That's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's a good place to end. But I also want to say that you're also a wonder, April.
I'm a wonder?
You're a wonder.
Thank you.
Like, I mean that. Like, this is, I think of it very, like those very powerful moments that I was talking about. A lot of times they are like me reflecting on like how lucky I feel to have all these wonderful people in my life. And that's like what inspires these conversations is that like, I've been fortunate enough to have enough experiences in my life to lead me to this point where like I have an ability to connect with people on this level. And like, it is so beautiful. And I'm so grateful for you and your friendship. And this has been a lovely conversation.
This has been. It's an honor to be on the pod. And I'm happy you're sharing your gift with the world. Just talking to your friends and showing the human connection. It's awesome.
I appreciate you.
Same.
Do you want to, I don't know how to do this shit, but do you want to talk about your, cause I was actually curious to talk to you about like your launch of things. We can talk about this here or like off the air or whatever.
Don't care. Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever.
It's not like I have this sprawling audience right now.
No, either way. Also, this conversation is so like just a genuine convo with a friend. Like if not, I don't have any ulterior motives or interests, but if the people want to know, they can go to petitepower.com and check it out.
There you go.
If you're 5'4" and shorter, if you're 6'4" tall man, you don't need that.
So my workouts, your workouts won't work for me.
Yeah, probably not your cup of tea, but it's all right. Not everything is meant for everyone.
That's another excellent point.